What up, is Marcus Dynasty with Ads? We have a mock draft with some landing spots here. So there's a couple landing spots that I absolutely do not like, and we're going to go through it right even in the beginning. 101 is a spot. Maybe it's just because I'm an owner of a current running back into that position, and so I feel like Bijan is going to bomb this spot for me. But there's a couple different, there are so many different mock drafts, and I will tell you towards the end here when we get into this tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to say tier 5. The tier 5 players, there's so much flexibility within that tier that I see a lot of, depending if they're drafted in round 2 or round 4, like round 3, like where are they drafted? That is going to be such a crucial point to where some of these players go. And so that's what we're going to be talking about as well. As always, we do our mock drafts pretty much we're going to be pretty much doing them every Friday into the weekend here. So you guys have at least some thoughts here, and let me know what you disagree with right off the bat here. If there's a player that you're like, man, why is this player not there? And I can always comment below here. 101, Bijan Robinson. It's always Bijan. 118 to Detroit. Now, I've seen multiple mock drafts lately that have had Bijan Robinson to Detroit. I absolutely do not like that because I'm a DeAndre Swift owner. I like DeAndre Swift. And if you're new to the channel, we still have our signed jersey that we're going to be giving away when we hit 2,000 subscribers. I know it's taking a little bit here, but when we hit 2K, we'll be giving that away to one of our listeners here. And so, again, Bijan Robinson, 118 to Detroit. They have David Montgomery. This makes almost no sense for Detroit. Detroit has all the weapons, and I've even seen Detroit mocked at certain wide receivers as well, which they have Monroe St. Brown, they have Jameson Williams. I don't really understand that as well. If I'm Detroit, I am trying to draft as much defense as possible because I think that's the weakness of the team. But you have Aiden Hutchinson, you have some good prospects around in Detroit for their defense. They have a couple good core pieces. I think they need to draft defense, but I'm not who knows? Maybe Dan Campbell loves running back and loves Bijan Robinson and can just not pass him up here. And so Bijan, 118 to Detroit, he has to be the 101. This hurts DeAndre Swift. And in fact, you're looking at DeAndre Swift being that Michael Carter type, which is super frustrating. A very talented Michael Carter, I should say. DeAndre Swift would be a Michael Carter plus. And really, you're kind of hoping that DeAndre Swift goes to another team and ends up being successful at a different team, which is horrible, and it does not look like a really good track record for previous running backs. You just got to hope. So, please, Bijan, don't go to Detroit. That would really hurt my feelings. And I also would hurt if he goes to the Chargers if Eckler's there too. So, man, I have a lot of Eckler shares and a lot of Swift shares, and I'm feeling the Bijan sweat. All right, next we get into tier number 2 here because Bijan's by himself. He's always been by himself. Number 2, 102, Bryce Young goes to the Texans, and honestly, we could probably go through 2, 3, 4 here pretty quickly, and we're going to because I have not seen a mock draft, or I shouldn't say I haven't seen them. I have seen very few that have had a mock draft that have not been this order. Bryce Young, 102, Texans. Anthony Richardson, 103 in this mock draft. 104 to the Colts, the 4th overall pick to the Colts. And then 101 has been Stroud, so he's going to be our 4th overall pick in Dynasty, our 3rd quarterback. They're in that tier. We had a whole discussion or a whole video on it 2 days ago. So if you want to watch that video, that's the reasoning. And I'm not even going to get into it deep because we got some other players that we need to get more into discussion with. So 102 Young, 103 Richardson, 104 Stroud. They're in a tier. So if you want to move that tier up a little bit or move some players around in that tier, totally understand. 105, Jahmyr Gibbs. He gets the 1st round draft capital, which is extremely surprising here. I don't think he's going to be a 1st round draft capital, but I didn't think Travis Etienne was going to be either. I thought he was going to be early 2nd. He ends up getting that end of 1st round draft capital. Now, he goes to the Eagles, 130 to the Eagles. Now, I think the Eagles, if they draft a running back like this with Jalen Hurts and all the weapons, I like this pick I like them getting a running back. At 130, I mean, do you get Bijan at 109, I think they have, or do you get Jahmyr Gibbs at 130? I would probably rather just get Bijan at 109 because he's that generational type talent, but whatever. Jahmyr Gibbs, 130. He gets the draft capital. He gets a good landing spot here. Kenneth Gainwell, still a good B-type running back. I think he's talented enough to be a good B-type running back that they can do a nice little 60-40 split. And I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, if you give him space, he's a little bit more electric. Miles Sanders is a more in between the tackles running back. Miles Sanders is not a good fit for the Eagles, and that's why they kind of separated ways. I think Jahmyr Gibbs could give the Philadelphia Eagles a little bit different type of look. And that's why they kept putting Boston Scott in. The Eagles did, because Boston Scott in an even kind of game were better fits at times than Miles Sanders. Number 106, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, JSN 120 to Seattle. I like this spot. Originally, you're thinking, man, they might have quarterback issues, but Geno Smith is there. Tyler Lockett's definitely into that age red alarm where you go, ooh, like that is not good. Like he's getting to the age of like where we start seeing these wide receivers, AJ Green, Julio Jones, Adam Thielen is one of them that I've already talked about the last year. It's like he's gonna start dipping off, and then so I think Tyler Lockett's on his way out. Maybe he has another good year, but I think that Jaxon Smith-Njigba here at Seattle is a great play. You have DK Metcalf, the big, ginormous wide receiver that is super fast, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba is the Tyler Lockett type. Separation. Can play deep. I mean, I love this. I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a great play here in Seattle. And again, if you want him at 105 over Jahmyr Gibbs, we've had to talk about that. I think that was earlier this, I don't know, that was within the last 2 weeks. So we've had that discussion in the last video. 107, Will Levis does drop. He gets to 119 here, so he doesn't get that top 10 draft capital. He goes to Tampa Bay, so he's got Mike Evans, he's got Chris Godwin, which is nice, but it's an okay pick. Will Levis, if he has the top 10 draft capital, then I would see a better argument for him over JSN or Gibbs, but I have to put him behind two players that I also think are very talented, semi-safe. I would say Gibbs is semi-safe. I would say Jaxon Smith-Njigba is safer. But two players that I absolutely love is Gibbs and JSN versus Levis, where I have some hot and cold on him. And so I have to have him at 107 here. He's ahead of some of these other wide receivers that I have in my wide receiver tier 2, but this ends my tier 3 on the prospects all as a whole. And so if you don't do tiers are super important, and we'll probably have a video here before draft season talking about tiers and how do you split them up and how do you get into some of these tiers and how do you trade and figure all this stuff out, because that is very, very important here. 108, Jordan Addison, he goes to Houston, 112. It's going to be a little bit of a rocky start here with Bryce Young. Rookie quarterbacks don't produce good wide receivers in fantasy. It just doesn't happen very often. And so Jordan Addison probably going to have a little bit of a slower start. But if Bryce Young's, and this is all, it's if and buts or candies and nuts, then I don't know what the rest of the saying is. But if Jordan Addison has Bryce Young that is a successful quarterback, if Bryce Young's a successful quarterback, kind of like the Joe Burrow and any rookie quarterback, if you have a good rookie quarterback that ends up being successful, which I think Bryce Young will be, then I think the wide receivers can definitely be very successful around them. And we've even seen that with Jalen Hurts, and we've seen that with any rookie quarterback. And if that rookie quarterback bombs, the wide receivers and stuff kind of bomb as well. So I'm basing Jordan Addison a little bit here on Bryce Young's success. And so right here, I like it. 109, Quentin Johnston. He goes to the 11th overall pick to Tennessee. Kind of confusing because Treylon Burks is a bigger type of wide receiver. Now you get another big type of wide receiver. I honestly would rather have Jordan Addison go to Tennessee. I think that's a better fit. I think that if you have the 11th pick Tennessee, take Jordan Addison. He's a better potential fit for your team than Quentin Johnston. But whoever, I am not the GM, so that's what I think. But he goes to Tennessee, gets really high draft capital. I still think that Tennessee has to figure out that quarterback situation. And again, a lot of these wide receivers, you might be taking, and so you have an idea, you might be taking an initial hit. So like some of these wide receivers, you're just going to have to think, okay, 2023 might be rough. 2024, that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping for that second, third year breakouts. This is Dynasty. This is not redraft. In redraft, there might be some wide receivers that we talk about in the future, and the next wide receiver that's even in a different tier that I'd rather have in redraft this next 2023 season over the 2022. But again, we're not talking about short term. We want the long term. So 110, we're going to shift down another tier. This is tier 5 where we start getting into chaos. We've got running backs and wide receivers and tight ends, and maybe even a little bit of Hendon Hooker here. We'll end up doing some full first and second round drafts here. But Zay Flowers, 121 to the Los Angeles Chargers. Love it here. So I guess Keenan Allen was resigned. So maybe I'm not taking him over a Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison in redraft anyways. But he does have a really good situation here. And I do love Zay Flowers. He is my type of wide receiver that I like over more of like a Quentin Johnston. But I think Quentin Johnston is just more talented of a wide receiver and better yards after contact and all that. There's like different things that I think Quentin Johnston's in a different tier. But really, I think Zay Flowers is a very solid wide receiver, and you're going to get him at the end of the first, or the middle to the end of the first year. The Chargers are at 121. That's where I'm going to have him here, 110. But again, you have from 110 and on, there's a lot of mess. And then there was probably 7-8 players that I'm like, man, okay, would I rather have him, him? It's all kind of a lot of team dependent. And so when you get into that 110 to like 204 or 5 range, it's kind of all the same. So if you want to trade back, if you want to trade up, I'm not trading up into like the 110, 111, 112 range unless Addison or Johnston or Levis or somebody falls. But unless there's the little asterisk here, Charbonnet, who we're going to talk about right now, 111, Zach Charbonnet, unless he gets drafted into that, I believe that second round. That second round is a very important time. I think that you got to have him in that second round. I know it's being nitpicky, but he was drafted in the end of the third round to Miami. Miami has a bunch of different running backs. I think that's a really good spot for Zach Charbonnet. I would really like that second round draft capital. Again, this is the same tier. Him and Zay Flowers. I was kind of like, back and forth on. Zach Charbonnet gets a third round draft capital. We know analytically. And yes, some of it has been a little bit skewed because running backs have been drafted later, but we know the success of a third-round running back versus a first-round wide receiver. The first-round wide receivers are so much safer than a third-round running back. Yet, we do try to, when we hit on those third-round running backs, it's a little bit more powerful because you get those running backs that are harder to have in Dynasty. They just are. And so you get like Dameon Pierce versus a first-round wide receiver last year. It's like, well, Dameon Pierce might have better value than some of these first-round wide receivers last year. And so, again, you're pulling teeth here. I probably could think about this. You know what? If I think about this, and if I had 110, let's just say in a lot of leagues, I'm probably drafting a little bit of Zach Charbonnet, a little bit of Zay Flowers, unless Zach Charbonnet gets drafted into that like second round. Then we're probably drafting a lot more Zach Charbonnet. If he gets drafted in the second round, you might be seeing him bumping over Johnston and Addison, honestly, depending on situation and talent and all that. So whatever. 112. Let's finalize this thing. We have Michael Mayer here. 115 to Green Bay. Green Bay drafting a tight end. I love it. I love that they have to draft a wide receiver or tight end just to give Aaron Rodgers an FU because that is the best. The best type is just saying, Rodgers, we didn't give you any talent. We're going to give Love as much talent as possible. So, Michael Mayer here, 115 to Green Bay. This is, in my opinion, the best tight end talent-wise. And there's a couple other tight ends that are close. I mean, this is a good tight end class. I mean, when we look at Dalton Kincaid, we look at Luke Musgrave, we look at Darnell Washington. We look at some of these tight ends, and if you honestly were like, I'm not going to take Michael Mayer, I'm going to take Roschon Johnson, which was a Buffalo running back drafted in this mock draft in the middle of the end of the second round. I just don't think Roschon's as talented as is Zach Charbonnet, and that's why I would probably draft him here in the early second. Devin A. Chain was drafted in the third round, and so there's some different players here that Jalen Hyatt. I mean, he was also drafted in the second round to the Falcons, a pretty good spot. I mean, there's some definite players here that I'm fine with kind of like any of them. There's like 3-4 players that I was like, I'm fine with kind of any of them. I'm okay. So that is why this tier is so big, and it is always this way. It is really always this way. You get from like that 110 to like 205, and there's just a bunch of players that some of them hit and some of them don't. But it's definitely kind of a very consistent area. So again, this is Marcus Dynasty. Hope you have a really good weekend, and we'll see you again next week.